Alright, how's it going, YouTube? So I was taking a look at the new Marincess support, which is a deck I dabbled with a little bit, but didn't really love. Basically, like, it was so reliant on somehow hard drawing or finding the trap card. Dies to Nibiru the same way Madolche does. It just doesn't really do anything super unique, but I think with the new support, I think it has genuine Tier 1 potential. So I'm going to kind of go through card by card and kind of explain at least what this test build is meant to do and why everything is good. So I'll go over pretty much every card. So if you're new to Marincess, since you're here from Adulche normally, let's learn how these watery princesses perform. So first things first, Marincess Plutang. This is basically a weird, hybrid of Salamangreat Foxy and Salamangreat Gazelle. When she's normal summoned, she sends a Marincess from your deck to the graveyard. And then if you link her away, she checks the top 3 cards of your deck. If there are any Marincesses, you can add one of them to hand. This card single-handedly gets you to a Link 4 Towers without losing a single other card in your hand. So everything else in the deck, once you get past Blue Tang, is gas. And there's lots of ways to find her. Dive can find her. Silent Mining can get her. Prosperity can find her. There's a lot of ways that we can find a copy of Blue Tang, and if we get Blue Tang, essentially everything falls into place from there. Next up, we have 3 Pascalis currently. So when she's normal summoned, she special summons a Marincess from your hand in defense position. Usually if you have Pascalis plus Blue Tang, that's the best possible opener. At least for like the basic combo. If she's in the graveyard later on, you can banish her to add a Marincess spell or trap. It can be really big for recovery, but really it's just the extension. I have 2 copies of Marincess Mandarin. This might actually go to 3 eventually, but basically, if she's in the hand of the graveyard and you control 2 Marincess monsters, she can special summon herself to a Link Pointer and then banish herself when she leaves the field. She's just a free Marincess extender. In some edge cases, you can normal summon her to at least get to the field spell to get the full plays online, and she is the best in-archetype extender. I'm on only 1 copy of Seahorse. I actually think this card is essentially power crept by some of the new support, so I think she probably goes to being a 1-of, which is very funny for everybody that bought up the Starlight. Essentially, she's an extender that special summons herself to a Marincess Link Pointer from hand. By herself, she represents by, I think, a Link 3 and no more. But the biggest problem is you have to special summon herself from your hand. And there's an out-of-archetype card that does that better than Seahorse does. She's still good, especially because if she's in the graveyard from last turn, you can banish her to special summon another Marincess from hand. She's just probably the 3rd or 4th best extender in the deck, so she might go to, I think 1 is probably fine. I would go more than that. 1 copy of Marincess Bastilla Lima. This is a card that isn't played currently, but mostly because Marincess traps, there's only 1 good one. There's another good one. I still don't know if this is worth running, but she also does add protection, so she's like not the worst target to send later on. I don't know, I'm still debating. She could go down to 0 for an extra copy of this card, Marincess Spring Girl. This card is crazy. First of all, this is an unofficial translation. Her name may change. So first of all, she's a chaos monster, essentially. She banishes a Marincess monster to special summon herself from hand. It doesn't seem all that good, but she doesn't just special herself to a Link Point, which is really nice. And her second effect is the really important one. If she's sent to the graveyard as material for a Link Water monster, you can mill the top 3 cards of your deck. Or top cards of your deck up to the number of Marincess monsters you control. Very, very, very powerful, especially because this deck is so good in graveyard recursions. Very much like a Water Salamangreat. The cards in the graveyard, you have access to it, and you can add it back with some of the Link monsters or other ways. And a lot of these cards in the deck actually have graveyard effects that are very powerful, especially some of our extenders. 2 copies of Sleepy Maiden, another good extender for the deck. Could consider putting this at 3, because the other thing that she does is if you are done with your combo and you have a copy of this in hand, you can use it to protect the field spell from either MST or Nightmare Phoenix, which means that the tower's effect is going to remain alive, regardless of whether or not you've managed to find a copy of Marincess Wave over the course of the combo. 3 copies of Marincess Dive. This is essentially Marincess E-Telly. It's also Monster Reborn, but you're almost always going to be resolving this as an emergency teleport. And 1 copy of Battle Ocean. This is going to be your normal search target off Sea Angel unless you've already drawn it, in which case you'll be going for the Marincess Dive. You could almost consider running multiples of the field spell just because essentially every copy of the field spell is also a copy of Dive. 3 copies of Marincess Wave. This is the best card in the deck. It is a trap that you can activate from your hand. That is imperm and also says all of your monsters are unaffected by your opponent's card effects until the end of the turn. Bonkers powerful card. They almost can't print a spell or trap searcher because this card is so good. What a copy of Circulation. I'm not sold on this card, but I'm willing to be proven wrong on it. So you have to have like a pretty big Marincess Link monster to make this worth it. And you're also losing... So there's a gimmick in the deck where if you have a monster in an EMZ that was made with Crystal Heart as material, it's unaffected by all effects. Or all of your opponent's effects. But the problem with using Circulation is that it doesn't use Crystal Heart's material, so you lose that protection, which like is okay thanks to Wave. You can essentially rebuy it for a turn. But there's also not that many situations you'd want to tag out. I basically remain unconvinced unless there's another card printed that is a trap searcher specifically. And again, you only need 1 copy of Wave to ever be found, so like if you could search it, you would probably run this at 1. Just to dodge any targeting effects that might end up harming something you have. As far as frogs, I'm on 3 swap, 1 Duke, 1 Ronin. I consider bumping this to 2 Ronin, but I don't know how to get this card down to 40 decks. Or, deck down to 40 cards, excuse me. And the weird thing about getting too many of these is they don't necessarily do what you need them to. And you can mill, for example, a swap frog off of Spring Girl, which can kind of get the whole thing going anyway. Because that means that Swap Frog getting milled is essentially 2 link material, which is really powerful. The dupe is nice because it does allow for a attack target lock. Although again, they can just kind of remove the dupe frog and not have a problem. The big secret spice is this package right here. These 4 monsters represent 3 at minimum link material, and potentially more. So if you haven't seen Crusadia Arborea, she is a tuner that special summons herself to a link pointer. That's really all you need to know, is that she is a water monster that special summons herself to a link pointer, and that by itself makes this card absolutely incredible. So your goal is to find one of these, and you can mill it with Spring Girl as well, because you can revive it with one of the link monsters. Go into Halki Fibrox and summon Fishborg Launcher, and because the entire deck except for hand traps is water, Fishborg Launcher should be able to represent 2 link material by himself. Running these allows you to make 2 link 4s before passing it to your opponent, one of which will be unaffected by all of your opponent's card effects, and the other of which is going to be drawing you a card as you enter your opponent's turn. While both being absolutely massive monsters. 3 Signet Mining to help find your blue tangs. I don't know how many Prosperity like to run, or if you should. In general, you can usually safely banish the Bahamut Shark, the Area, and the Wonderheart or the Splash Mage. But at the same time, like, Prosperity for 3 is a little less interesting. I'm a little unconvinced. And then some number of hand traps. I do think that the better ones are something like a Veiler that doesn't have a hard ones per turn, because you are going to be drawing one on your opponent's turn. And I might stay away from Infinite Impermanence, because one thing about this deck is it does equip link monsters to your, or equip a lot. So you do have 3 spell and trap zones that are already occupied. So if you draw multiple imperms, you'd be locking yourself out of activating like your waves from hand, for example. In the extra deck, we're on 1 Bahamut Shark. You can make this with Blue Tang, Piscalis, and Spring Girl. I don't know that you would, I'll be totally honest. It's a very strange thing to say. But the problem is you really want to link off Blue Tang and Spring Girl, so you'd have to revive them later on to get it. And it's just a little bit weird. Kind of tricky to get all the effects off that you want. And again, Spring Girl's mill is incredibly important because if you can mill either a Dive or an Arborea or a Fishboard Launcher or a Marincess Wave, like those are all absolutely key cards to get milled. So you want to get as big a mill with Spring Girl as possible. 1 Toad for our Frog package and a Bahamut Shark. We have a Crystron Halki Fibrax, which again allows us to convert the Arborea into multiple link material. 1 copy of Area, just the best generic link 2 for water. Link kind of away any problematic cards. 1 Aqua Argonaut. This is the new Marincess link. So essentially she has a magnet effect when she's in the EMZ. Your opponent has to attack her. She can bounce 1 water monster you control and 1 card your opponent controls. And she has a spell and trap negate by special summoning an equipped Marincess monster. Very, very powerful card. Also gives the deck something it was sorely lacking, which is non-battle removal of monsters. Or like anything really. This deck does not really interact with back row. It kind of tries to ignore the problem using Wave and a lot of very, very large unaffected monsters. 2 Blue Slug. This gets all of your plays going by adding a Marincess back to hand. This is how the deck functioned before Blue Tang was printed. You would link away a Seahorse into Blue Slug, and then special the Seahorse to Blue Slug's link pointer in order to climb into a Coral Anemone or a Sea Angel. 2 Coral Anemone, this card is absolutely crazy. Did you know this card can revive anything with 1500 or less attack, including Halki Fibrax? You can use her to revive Arborea to go into Hulk. You can use her to revive a Swap Frog to get those plays online, or she can just revive a Marincess card. Sometimes you mill a Pascalis and have a Marincess in hand you'd like to special summon. 1 copy of Crystal Heart to get our protection online from the field spell. 1 Great Bubble Reef. This was the original going first monster in the deck, but I do think you probably go for Aqua Argonaut just because she represents a negation. But admittedly, being able to draw a card means you can draw into multiple hand traps, and an unaffected 5300 monster is very difficult for a lot of decks to out, especially if you are smart about where you use your Wave or your Veilers over the course of your turn. Marbled Rock, not too much to say. She's a link 3 that can add a Marincess card in your graveyard to hand. Essentially, she is your Salamandrate's Sunlight Wolf. She also has a protection effect if your opponent tries to attack, which can be relevant. Sometimes you will end with something like an Aqua Argonaut and a Marbled Rock, both of which will be unaffected, so when your opponent tries to swing in, Marbled Rock can protect the Aqua Argonaut. 1 copy of Sea Angel. This searches a spell or trap. You can consider bumping this to 2 now that there is both Dive and the field spell, but you also can recycle her between Marbled Rock and Coral Anemone. When she goes to the graveyard, can add a water Marincess card engraved to hand. Wonder Heart is an OTK enabler. You can equip a bunch of Marincess monsters to her, and then when she attacks, she can special summon one of them. You can use this with something like a Marbled Rock to get multiple very, very large monsters out, but in general, she kind of has fallen by the wayside in favor of lots of the other Marincess cards. And lastly, we're on a Splash Mage, which just so happens to be water. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this video here, because I believe we're past 14 minutes, and then I will have a second video with a couple of sample combos. Again, I'm not going to show them with interaction or what hand traps might be, but they will show what the deck is capable of and some of the end boards capable of producing.